Joining us now is Ambassador Alon Pinkas, former advisor to Israeli Prime Ministers Ehud Barak and Shimon Peres. He also served as Israeli Consul General in New York. Ambassador, thanks for being with us. With the remaining Israeli hostages finally free, the living hostages, as Israelis are celebrating this, how significant is this moment for your country? Describe why returning the hostages became such a national mission.
Well, it's a very significant moment. You know, it's the apex of 2 years worth of frustration, exhaustion, but also now jubilation and elation. There was a lot of anger throughout those 2 years for what seemed, at least in the last year, as Mr. Netanyahu protracting the war unnecessarily for his own political reasons. Let's be honest about this, without pooping the party. This deal could have been done a year ago, and this deal could have been done 6 months ago. The fact that it's been done now is only because President Trump did something that his 3-4 immediate predecessors refrained from doing, and that is pressure Israel. And Israelis are cognizant of that and appreciate that. All that said, Ariel, I don't know. I can't tell you. We all speculate, but no one really knows whether this anger, this frustration is going to be channeled into or vented against Netanyahu right now, because people also understand that he did not want this agreement. And so once, as you correctly pointed out, once the hostages are home, and the reason an entire nation was behind them is that, well, two reasons, actually. It's part of Jewish tradition to care for the other as if you care for yourself, and to care for the other because he is the community. But it's also an Israeli value. Since the establishment of Israel, no one left behind, no soldier left behind, camaraderie at every cost, to the point that it sometimes doesn't make sense that you're endangering soldiers to save one soldier. And the statistics could work against you, but you work based on values. So an entire society coalesced around this principle, while one prime minister seemed to have departed from that principle. And that was the source of the demonstrations and the anger that you saw in the last at least year and a half around the issue of the hostages.
It's important context about the social contract in Israeli society. In his remarks this morning, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu highlighted his determination to achieve, quote, peace through strength. Let's listen.
We have paid a high price for this war, but our enemies now understand just how powerful and just how determined Israel is. They understand that attacking Israel on October 7th was a catastrophic mistake. They understand that Israel is strong and that Israel is here to stay. And this, Mr. President, is the indispensable foundation of peace. Peace through strength.
Netanyahu also said that Israel's hand is stretched to anyone who wants peace. But given the political pressure that Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing from his far-right flank, is regional peace achievable?
No, not without the Palestinians and not with this government. And this speech by Mr. Netanyahu, Ariel, was just a on-brand collection of his platitudes. Peace through strength. What the hell does that even mean? When did he ever extend his hand to anyone in an offer of peace? Now, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying the neighborhood is a decent place filled with good actors with goodwill. Not at all. But for him to say this is just, smoke and mirrors. This is a guy who refused to take responsibility for the calamity of October 7th, 2023, refuses to be held accountable. In fact, if it wasn't for his hubris in attacking Qatar on September 9th, we wouldn't be having this conversation, Ariel, and we wouldn't have this agreement. The day before he went to the White House to see President Trump, he said on Fox News that the war will go on until the final victory against Hamas. He also said that he won't apologize to Qatar. 24 hours later, he does the exact opposite on both. So my point here is that, you could talk about regional peace all you want, but the core issue right now, and this is something, by the way, that Netanyahu unsuccessfully for years tried to divert attention from. The core issue remains the Palestinians, not because they're nice, not because we love them. They are neither. That's not the point. There is a strip of land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. It has 15 million people, half are Palestinians, half are Israeli Jews. Either they separate or they live in one state. I don't even want to begin to go with you into the details of what a one state would look like. And so if he thinks he can cut a deal with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar, with
Gaza, now back home in Israel. The ceasefire persists there in the enclave, devastated after 2 years of war, an estimated 60,000 Palestinians killed. Palestinian prisoners also, some released this morning as part of phase one of a deal brokered by President Trump. We are continuing our live coverage on this holiday edition of Morning Joe. Richard Haass and David Ignatius are still with us, along with NBC News national security editor David Rode. Our thanks for listening in with us. Gentlemen, Richard, I will start with you. In many ways, this was a deeply political speech. Parts of it felt like a Trump rally speech that could have been delivered anywhere in the United States, not necessarily the Knesset, including in the last few minutes, sort of a fairly breathtaking call for the Knesset there and the president of Israel to issue a pardon for Prime Minister Netanyahu. Give us some of your thoughts of what we just heard from the president.
For one thing, what you said, that Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has to be extraordinarily happy. If Donald Trump is disappointed that Bibi Netanyahu is not making the trip today to attend the peace summit in Egypt, it didn't show. There were things that were said today that will literally be cut into campaign endorsements for Bibi Netanyahu when the Israeli elections happen sometime early next year. Second of all, there was some nice general language, Jonathan, about an opportunity in the Middle East, about turning the page, if you will, from war to peace. In the Bible, you'd almost say turning your swords into plowshares. What was missing, though, was, other than one or two sentences, any reference to the Palestinian issue, any need about Israel essentially to get serious about compromising. Very little was said to flesh out where we go from here. It was just in generalities on stilts, to be honest. So anyone trying to read or listen carefully to the speech to get real hints as to what this administration is prepared to do to advance the ball, I didn't hear it. The other thing that worries me a little bit, and again, it's not the day to be raining on the parade, but let me just say it, is that the president is talking so much about how all this is behind us. And I look at the Middle East and I look at Hamas still in the streets. I think disarming Hamas is going to be an impossibility. I see Israel continuing its settlements programs and so forth. I think the chance of this ceasefire breaking down are real. There's such a sense of that peace is at hand and what has been accomplished. And what was missing from this was a sense of the difficulty to come and the clear commitment of the United States. At one point, he even talked about his principal negotiator, Steve Witkoff, returning to focus on Russia and Ukraine. I'm not against a focus on Russia and Ukraine, but that didn't signal a real sense of just what has to be done here. So, again, this is more of a victory lap speech for the president, and, again, a clear political, if you will, endorsement of Bibi Netanyahu. But I don't think there was a lot here that showed that he and his administration are aware already of what needs to be done. I hope that's implicit there, but we'll see.
David Ignatius watching with us in Washington. Certainly, this was at times a very rambling speech from President Trump. He did salute members of his team, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, among those who got shout-outs from the president. He had a number of diversions along the way in this more than an hour-long remarks here. He did commit to Richard's point a moment ago. He did say that Hamas would be disarmed. He did say that Gaza would be demilitarized. No details provided. Give us your thoughts of his speech, but also the tripwires here. This is not a president who's always known for focus or follow through, and this situation is going to require both of that and extreme measures. What are some challenges that lie ahead?
So, Jonathan, this was a relaxed, rambling, celebratory president. He was basking in the success of today, the release of the hostages, the announcement of the peace agreement that he has worked hard on. It was almost a family affair as he went around the room and pointed at this one and that one. He did have a couple of sort of tart things to say about Prime Minister Netanyahu. Not the easiest guy in the world to deal with, he said at one point, and you knew that he was referring to the process that led to today, where Trump did have to lean on Netanyahu pretty hard. I found it fascinating that in this spirit of being the peacemaker, where Netanyahu had given a kind of victory speech that was about the battle, this was very much a peacemaker speech. He extended his hand to Iran and said, I think we can make a deal with Iran. That's something that Israelis probably are mystified to hear. But
don't buy the propaganda. This trip, the peace, quote unquote, achieved is one, highly tentative, but it's largely not real. And it's not real because Trump and Netanyahu and many others are not actually interested in peace. They're interested in the subjugation of the Palestinian people, right? They just want them to go away. They don't want actual rights. And you're already seeing some moves by elements of Netanyahu's government that seek to violate the ceasefire, saying, oh, we still got to go in and clear out the tunnels, quote unquote, and all that. You also see continued mistreatment of the Palestinians in the West Bank, which has been largely ignored. That's the other side. Remember, there's part of Palestine that's right on the Mediterranean Sea. That's the small little bit in Gaza. But there's the much bigger territory in the West Bank, which wasn't part of this active conflict at this level, but which for a long time Israel's been attacking in a kind of soft war where they sort of let, with partial approval by the Israeli government, it's not totally official, but they still let it happen and often help, where they basically illegally settle on the land of another country. And none of that's going to stop. None of that's going to stop. And so, as noted, because there's not been meaningful inclusion of the Palestinians in this process, and because Israel does not want to, and because, in large part, even though Netanyahu's unpopular in Israel with domestic policy, there's a lot of support for his approach to Palestine among the Israeli population. None of this is going to change. So keep this in mind. This Donald Trump trip is going to end up as a disaster. And everyone who signs on to it, every leader from the Middle East, every leader from the West, Carney and other, the leaders from France and Britain who sign on to this, when it fails, they're going to have egg on their face. Because this is just a plan to further cleanse Palestine in a very horrific manner. And I don't think people are going to accept it.